Hello, welcome to this quick training video on benefit cost transfers. Today we are going to talk about what the benefit cost transfer process does, how to enter a benefit cost transfer, as well as how to review an existing benefit cost transfer transaction. During the direct retro process, salary cost transfers, fringe expenses including composite benefit rate CBR and non-CBR benefit actuals are automatically redistributed and prorated to follow user-specified salary expense redistribution. The benefit cost transfer process, BCT, allows locations to move benefit costs from one account or fund to another. It does not allow the movement of dollars from one deduction code to another. Redistribution of dollars is restricted to the same deduction code. Again, benefit cost transfers allows the transferring of benefit expenses without moving salary expenses. Here are a few situations in which you would want to use benefit cost transfer. For example, if an employee is paid on a funding source for which the sponsor prohibits some but not all of the benefit expense components of the CBR from being charged to a specific funding source, if they require a lower fringe rate than the configured CBR, if they prohibit all fringe expenses, CBR and non-CBR, from being charged to a specific funding source, if they prohibit a benefit expense not included in the CBR from being charged to a specific funding source, if miscellaneous benefit expense adjustments are required due to sponsor audit findings or award closeouts. This is an important reminder that benefit cost transfers should be final. Do not process a direct retro transaction, a salary cost transfer, after you've processed a benefit cost transfer transaction for the same paycheck or payroll. It will cause benefit expenses to be out of sync between the direct retro and the benefit cost transfer. If business needs require this, locations are responsible for providing a subsequent benefit cost transfer to move the benefit expenses back to the original full accounting units, FAUs, before proceeding with the direct retro. When you submit a benefit cost transfer, it does trigger the approval workflow at the location level. Upon final location approval, the benefit cost transfer transaction is picked up by a custom process and processed every week over the weekend. For high-risk benefit cost transfer transactions, these require a higher level approval in UCPath. In these situations, if there is an increase in expenses on a federal or flow-through fund, FFT, and it is in violation of the 120-day rule or the 90-day rule at the time of submission by the initiator, then the requests must have high-risk approval routing. Requests that increase or decrease the expense on a non-federal grant or contract are not considered high risk. When initiating a new benefit cost transfer transaction, navigate through the PeopleSoft menu to Payroll for North America, Payroll Distribution, UC Customizations, and process benefit cost transfer. Begin the steps for entering a new benefit cost transfer transaction on the Add a New Value tab. Notice the Run Control ID displays the default of new. You cannot update this value. When you successfully submit the transaction, the system will automatically assign a direct retro ID number. Click Add to display the page on which you enter the new funding details. Begin the system steps by entering the appropriate earnings date range and the employee ID. If the employee has multiple jobs, select the appropriate employee record. The system allows for updates to only one job's earnings in a benefit cost transfer transaction. If all jobs require updating, enter multiple benefit cost transfer transactions, one for each job requiring a redistribution. The system defaults the dates to begin and end of the current fiscal year. After you enter the employee's ID and record number, click Search. All the processed payrolls for the employee within the given date range appear. Select the checkbox next to the payroll for which you want to enter a benefit cost transfer, or select multiple checkboxes to process adjustments for multiple payrolls in a single transaction. Click the Save button to prompt the system to display the Run button. After you save the transaction, there is open activity on the selected payroll or pay periods. This means that no other users can make changes for these periods until the transaction is complete. That is, until updates are made to the distribution lines. If necessary, click Cancel to close the transactions and the periods will be available for updating. Click the Run button, which triggers a process that fetches payroll distribution data based on the payroll selected and transfers it to the Review Benefit Cost Transfer page. The Old Data section displays the current funding detail. In the New Data section, enter the necessary updates. You can make several types of updates in the New Data section. You can add or delete rows based on the desired redistribution of funding, or split funding between multiple funding sources. However, you cannot create or eliminate benefit expenses using this transaction. This transaction is solely used for changing the funding source. After you enter data, click Check the Balance. When the old data does not match the new data total, the system generates an error message. The earnings must balance before you can save and submit the transaction. It is required to enter comments. Expand and complete the questionnaire section if applicable. Completion is required for high-risk transactions. Select the reason for the adjustment. This is a required field. Attach a supporting document if necessary. To submit the transaction for review and approval, click Submit. After you submit, the system displays the workflow routing details below the reason code field. Prior to a final location approval, the transaction remains in a hold state, which prevents it from being picked up in the nightly batch processing. Upon final location approval, the transaction page updates the transaction status to approved, which then makes the transaction available for nightly batch processing for redistribution and journalization. After final approval of a benefit cost transfer, the system automatically sends an email notification to the location initiator, which indicates that the transaction is approved. To review benefit cost transfers, navigate to the Review Benefit Cost Transfer by selecting PeopleSoft menu, Payroll for North America, Payroll Distribution, UC Customizations, and Review Benefit Cost Transfer. Use the Review Benefit Cost Transfer page to access a transaction that has been entered and saved but not submitted. You can also use this page to access transactions that have been submitted and are awaiting approval or have already been approved. This page provides an audit trail of changes made on a particular benefit cost transfer transaction. It provides key information such as process status, approval status, pay period or pay periods, old and new data, initiator comments, and approval details if applicable. The Benefit Cost Transfer Transaction section displays the system-generated Run Control ID, the location initiator's ID and name, and the date on which the transaction was created. The Created field identifies the date the transaction was created, but not necessarily the date the transaction was processed. The two status fields indicate the processing status and the request status. Processing status is the overall status. Valid values are initiated, editing, and complete. The processing status of editing indicates the transaction will be updated in the nightly process. The request status indicates the approval workflow approval status of the transaction. Valid values are in progress, approved, denied, and complete. The benefit expenses section displays the employee's ID and name and the pay distribution details. This section also provides an audit trail of updated data. It includes the benefits distribution before and after the update. Note the number of pay periods available for review. If there is only one selected pay period, as indicated by 1 of 1 displayed at the top of the benefits expenses section, when multiple pay periods appear, use the View All function to list all earnings data, as well as the old data and the new data sections for each pay period. The bottom of the page displays the requester comments field, questionnaire answers, if applicable, the transaction reason code, access to justification documents, and approval details. The requester comments, questionnaire answers, if applicable, and the transaction reason codes provide insight as to why the benefit cost transfer transaction was necessary. If the initiator or the approver upload one or more documents to the transaction, the View Attachment button will be enabled. Click the button to view the attached document. If the transaction has been submitted, the system displays the approval routing details. Approvers can enter comments on any transaction routed for their approval, but they must enter comments when denying the transaction. Having completed this training, you should be able to describe the benefit cost transfer process, enter a benefit cost transfer, and review an existing benefit cost transfer transaction. Simulations are available in the UC-Path Help to walk through step-by-step how to enter benefit cost transfers and review existing benefit cost transfer transactions. Please feel free to use these for additional practice. Thank you for joining me for this training video on benefit cost transfers. If you have questions or need help, please feel free to join us for a UC-Path Learning Lab to work one-on-one with one of our team members, or reach out to UCB UC-Path at berkeley.edu.